It's a wonderful day in the homiehood, a wonderful day for a homie. Won't you be my homie to Taro? There has been a sixth report from the International Panel on Climate Change, I believe it's called. I'm not entirely sure of the name, but if you're unaware, climate change is bad. And it's coming for us all, or at least 50% of us on planet Earth. This is from the Science Reporter and Environmental Reporter from the Globe and Mail. Actions to stave off climate breakdown are possible but urgent, the UN report says. So there's been a final summary of an 8-year process by scientists, economists, and other experts to determine the current state and future course of the Earth's climate. The message has never been so well documented. So the reason that this is good, essentially, because we all know climate change is bad. Everybody knows, even the most conservative people in politics talk about climate change because the warnings are right in front of us now. So we have increased climate disasters happening, especially like on the West Coast. We even had severe weather where I live in southern Ontario, where people feel pretty safe. And we know that, earthquakes and floods, there are things that are happening around the world, and it's a worldwide problem because a lot of the people living in these precarious zones are going to need somewhere to go if their homes are no longer inhabitable. So, of course, that's something that scares the shit out of rich people. And suddenly they need to take it seriously as well because they're like, oh my goodness, all these poor people from other countries are going to come and disrupt my political system, which largely benefits rich people, right? So it's something that we are all forced to take more seriously in this day and age, especially the powers that be, because they've kind of sat on their hands for too long. So this report will serve as a resource for policymakers at a critical moment in history, a time when it is imperative that climate actions become a much higher priority, said IPCC Chair Ho-Sung Lee at a news briefing on Monday. And just so I'm getting this right, what is IPCC? Okay, I was right. Well, just about. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So this is great. This article kind of goes through a lot of different professional opinions, such as Greg Flatto here saying who is a research scientist with Environment and Climate Change Canada, saying that the human role in climate change is deemed unequivocal based on scientific evidence. So again, as I said, this is the sixth report from the IPCC over 8 years. At first, they were not actually as sure that that climate change is human caused. So now they have increased that to have like very strong language use, citing very strong evidence that what is happening with our climate is the result of human negligence, right? And you can see in this graph as well that there are different scenarios here. This blue scenario is if we were to keep warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius with limited overshoot. And I guess you can see that there's like the area around it is the 50% likelihood range. Oops, I made it smaller by zooming in. Let's open it in a new tab here. Oh, right. I forgot they do this. So you can see the yellow here is if warming is held to 2 degrees with 67% likelihood range. And the bottom line here is the net zero. So 1.5 degrees, we can actually achieve net zero by 2100. But if we continue on the path we are on, we can see we'll probably go even beyond this red line. And with implemented policies to date, with 50% likelihood and 90% likelihood ranges, we will be well above net zero. This is saying about 60 gigatons of CO2 per year. So obviously compounding over the next like 80 years, that's a lot of gigatons. And it is in a way really encouraging to see that, hey, there is a scenario where we can approach net zero. There is a scenario where we can even come close to achieving net zero. And if it's not perfect, well, it's not perfect. But there is this documented danger that we can avoid. So in a way, being aware of this stuff, it does motivate us to look and try to create a better world. Peter Thorne, a report author and professor of physical geography at Maynooth University in Ireland, says that this is why the rest of the decade is key. He said during a briefing, the rest of this decade is about whether we can apply the brakes and stop the warming at that level. So, maybe in his opinion, we have like 7 years maybe to get this under control. Other main takeaways from this report were that losses and damage owing to a changing climate are apparent around the globe, with nearly half the world's population in regions that are highly vulnerable to climate change. So, of course, 50% of the world potentially being highly vulnerable. That is undoubtedly something that will affect 100% of the world. The best solutions for dealing with the problem, including shifting to low carbon energy sources, will not only reduce future environmental harms, but improve human health outcomes, which I think we all have a vested interest in. Personally, I would like to have better health and see the majority of people have better human health. So I really like how this is kind of like creating a scaffolding that, hey, not only is saving the climate change going to be good for the environment, but also for us humans as well, obviously, because we are products of our environment. Increasing investments and removing financial and other systemic barriers to sustainable development will ensure that technology and human ingenuity can be applied to the problem to best effect. So, I guess this is probably good news for like developers and people in business, right? Is like, hey, we need to create a stimulus around these developments and encourage people who have the money to invest in a more clean technology in the future. Sarah Birch is a Canada research chair in sustainability governance and innovation at the University of Waterloo. They say, I'm thrilled by the growing recognition that if we want good jobs, beautiful communities, thriving nature, and healthy people, dealing with climate change head on is central to all of it, Professor Birch said. Ms. Curtis is director of the Indigenous Leadership Initiative, an Ottawa-based group focused on Indigenous-led conservation. For the past decade, ILI has been working with Indigenous communities on initiatives including Indigenous protected and conserved areas, as well as guardian programs. So this is IPCA, IPCA, Indigenous Protected and Conserved Areas. The thing that gives me hope is that I know a lot of the solutions lie with Indigenous peoples, Ms. Curtis says. Forests, wetlands, and grasslands, often referred to as nature-based climate solutions, can capture and store carbon and help in mitigation by reducing the impact of flooding, wildfires, and other disasters. So this is also really encouraging to see. I think this IPCA, Indigenous Protected and Conserved Areas, like that is a great initiative, going to be stronger than just designating things as like national parks, for example. So it's really nice to see that they are kind of like also encouraged by this report. William Chung, an ocean scientist at the University of British Columbia and author in a newly released synthesis report, said that those who are involved in the next cycle should also aim to look at the relationship between the larger suite of global societal challenges, including climate change, food security, and biodiversity conservation. They are so interconnected, yet they are often dealt with separately in national and international policy discussions. So, again, kind of pointing to the multifaceted approach that we need to have. And I mean, I guess the good news is that if we actually approach this, um, we might be able to have better outcomes for ourselves as a species, in other regards as well. So lots of different pictures here, different examples of uh, climate change happening, uh, whether it's drought or flood or fire or a hurricane. You know, this is not really the world we want to live in. These are murky waters for beluga whales. My goodness, firefighting here. So yeah, I guess what an interesting mix of pictures here, just kind of showing that it is in fact a worldwide problem, right? It's so hard to look at the big picture sometimes because we're so focused on isolated stories and incidents. Um, so it does make me feel a bit hopeful thinking about a better planet. You know, it makes me kind of think of some of those 15-minute city artist renditions and the idyllic society that we could potentially achieve.